Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Edith Juguna, and I am the director of the Illinois Education and Career Success Network. Very excited to host this webinar with our presenters today on centering students through human-centered design. So the mission of the Success Network, for those of you that might not be familiar with it, is to support communities to increase meaningful and equitable post-secondary attainment. And when we talk about meaningful, we're talking about ensuring that students are pursuing goals that lead to a family-sustaining wage and that they are passionate about. And when we talk about equitable, we want to ensure that we're reaching students who are farthest from opportunity. And we do this in a number of ways. We share best practices and foster peer-to-peer learning. Today's webinar is an example of that. We provide technical assistance on a variety of topics, from career pathways to data to policy implementation and a lot more. And then we seek funding, which we give to our leadership communities to help them implement their goals to increase equitable post-secondary attainment. And we gather and curate data that communities can use to inform their work. So like I said, I'm really excited to have three presenters today who are very familiar with the topic of human-centered design. We have Caitlin Botsios, co-director and executive director of education at Helix Education. Sean Connolly, co-founder and executive director of business operations, also at Helix Education, and Rachel Switsky, inaugural director of the Siebel Center for Design at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And now I'll kick it to you, Caitlin.
Good morning, everyone. As Edith mentioned, I'm Caitlin, and I'm the co-founder and executive director at Helix Education, and I'm going to be kind of our main speaker for a while here. My colleague Sean may kind of jump in at certain times if I forget something or monitor the chat. So hi, Sean. And then we're thrilled to have Rachel here, one of our experts from the Siebel Center of Design. Thanks for joining us, Rachel. We're thrilled to have you. So I'm going to go over an agenda in a moment, but want to just let you know, I'm Caitlin, I'm with Helix. I'm a former classroom teacher and current NLU professor, lover of dogs. I adopted one from a former student, and I am thrilled that college basketball season is upon us, as it has kicked off recently, my favorite time of year. And I'm currently reading Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, which was another book by the author of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, if you read that. So I'm going to be guiding us through here over kind of the next hour. And here's what you can anticipate. We're already checking off a welcome. We've been here, done that. I'm going to be getting into what is Helix Education, and then talking about design thinking and human-centered design. And we'll kind of go over how those words are kind of interchangeable, why you might hear one or the other, and where those kind of all come together. We'll talk about Helix human-centered design in action. Then I'll turn it over to our amazing Rachel from the Siebel Center for Design for a bit on their programming for you all. And then we'll do a brief design activity. We'll have Q&A, and we'll be rocking and rolling. Any questions on our agenda? I'm going to have my chat open. I may look over here, but if you need anything, please feel free to chat in. While this is webinar style, you can tell we're not in the actual webinar. I would love for you to interact, chat in questions. If there's the opportunity to come off mute, it's kind of boring if I'm just talking at you. So as needed, please jump in. And with that, I also want to let you know, we could talk about this session for, honestly, an entire course. People have master's degrees and things like this. So this is only an hour. So the depth of each of these questions, maybe we're kind of going surface level, but ideally at the end of this hour, you'll know what is design thinking and human-centered design. You'll start to have an idea of how can I use human-centered design tools in my context. We're going to give you some to use and some examples of how we've used different things along the way. And we'll start to talk about how can you center students through human-centered design. So this is where we're going. And once again, you may not get all your questions answered, but this is why we've got more resources coming to you and opportunities to connect moving forward. So jumping into Helix Education, we're a nonprofit, and our goal is to create environments for students and educators to thrive through thoughtful collaboration using human-centered design practices, customized to the unique needs of each educational environment. As an educator, and I feel like I'm hoping you're with me, people would give me things all the time that had never been used with students or had never been used with students in my context. Ideally, human-centered design, we'll get into this, solves for a bit of that, acknowledging that every student, every environment, every educator is a little unique. And we'll see trends that can then be solved through many different things, but ideally we're changing things up, and you see this on the ground. I'm talking to experts here. With Helix, then, we really value human-centered design. We're gonna hit you over the head ad nauseum with this. We talk about the power of confidence, curiosity, and exploration. We think that is critical for students and educators to succeed. We also know the power of the unique educational ecosystem. Many of you are from across the state. We are in this network for college success, or for its college success ecosystem, but we know that you're in your individual ecosystems as well, and each of those has unique opportunities and limitations, and we want to acknowledge that. We also really try and center the fact that learning opportunities are everywhere. They're not just within school walls. There are many of you from other organizations that work beyond the school day, and we want to acknowledge that you're a part of the learning system for all of our students. When folks work with Helix, we try and center this idea of the Helix model, and this is our approach to human-centered design principles. And anytime folks work with us, we take you through our own steps, and you're going to hear a bunch of different steps, but they really boil down to kind of the same idea of discovering what a problem is, working with folks to co-design, creating something, launching something, refining and trying it again. And we see this as highly adaptable to different environments and centering users. And this is kind of centering who is the most important to you, who you're serving, versus there's current systems that sometimes don't necessarily center students or might not center educators, wherever you're coming from. So this is really where Helix is. Any questions on Helix? We'll get in more examples of what we do. We do curriculum design, we do program design, we've facilitated our own programs. We've been with you in the weeds of many different things over the years. We're based out of Chicago, but we work nationwide. So we're happy to work with any across the state too. Well, with that, let's get into the heart of, let's talk design thinking, human-centered design. How many of you have heard of human-centered design or design thinking? Feel free to pop it in the chat or come off mute. Who knows something about it? Karen, awesome. You've heard of this before. Awesome. Fantastic. What context have you heard of it in? Ooh, Monica, UX. Emily, mostly in tech, heard of it. Fantastic. And we'll get into a little bit of that. Okay, so we've heard it in CS and tech, and this is like spot on. And we're gonna watch a video in just a second here about how this really does come to us from this tech product design world, but that there are implications throughout. So I'm gonna kick us off with a video here, and let me know if you can't hear this.
This is the first Apple computer mouse. It came with Apple's $10,000 Lisa computer, and it was designed by a product design consulting firm that would eventually become known as IDEO. The assignment was straightforward. They had to take the computer mouse, a $400 device at the time, and bring it down to under 35 bucks, make it mass producible and reliable. And above all, it needed to be simple.
We control Lisa by pointing to these images on the screen with this unique item called a mouse.
Fast forward about 30 years, and IDEO doesn't really create products anymore. They've transitioned to designing networks and experiences, things like Los Angeles's voting system and the Red Cross's method for finding donors, even entire schools. So what does making a computer mouse have to do with creating a school system from scratch? It turns out, quite a lot.
The world we live in is one where really the complex things are the things that are mostly broken, not the simple things. We have lots of great products, lots of beautiful products, lots of products we can use every day. Everything from furniture to tableware to consumer electronics. They're mostly pretty good, right? And yes, there's opportunity to do better and do more, but I'm interested in the things that don't work very well and the things that you can impact society with, and they're mostly the more complex things.
Back in 1971, a designer named Victor Papanek wrote a book called Design for the Real World. The premise was pretty simple. Creators could take some of the same design strategies from the creation of industrial products and use them to tackle problems like pollution and overcrowding and food shortages. By 2001, IDEO had done just that, pivoting from products to real-world experiences. But the design steps? Tim Brown says they stay just about the same.
The first piece is observing the world in order to ask an interesting question, right? And you can observe the world in lots of different ways. When we talk about human-centered design, we're really talking about observing the way humans live their lives and asking interesting questions about, hey, why does somebody do this and not that? Or why is somebody struggling with this problem? Why is it hard for somebody to open that, why are they struggling to open that jam jar lid? Well, so maybe I could redesign the jam jar lid, right? Or maybe I could give them a tool to help them, right? So why is this happening? So the first step is that looking at the world and coming up with a good question.
For making a mouse, that means watching how people use computers and observing what they want and what they don't. For designing a school, that meant spending a month in Peru, meeting with students and parents, teachers, investors, government and business leaders to address needs like academic planning, modular classroom space, accessible technology, and affordable tuition.
The next step is taking all the insights you have about those questions and starting to imagine ideas, like here's what I could do, here's what I might imagine doing better or differently. So that's what we often call ideation or idea making.
Then comes the fun part. You test it out.
Right at the beginning of the process, that might be a really simple cardboard model or a quick sketch, or if it's digital, it might be a quick digital simulation or something. And you try it out with people.
Sometimes those drafts can be pretty rough. The first prototype for the mouse was a roll-on deodorant stick and a butter dish from a Palo Alto Walgreens.
And you test it and see, and it doesn't work. Okay, so I need to rethink my idea, and I do it again, right? And this is where the iteration comes in, right? You learn from the prototype, you realize what's not working, or maybe it's a crummy idea, you have to go back and find a new idea again. And you go through that loop over and over again, asking the question, having ideas, prototyping, learning, and until you get to something that truly meets somebody's needs or a set of people's needs. Now, the last bit of the process, which arguably happens in that iteration, also is the storytelling piece, right? Because always you're trying to explain to people why your idea is interesting.
Macintosh, the computer for the rest of us.
I think what you need to design a complex system is not one brain, you need lots of brains. You need lots of brains with different perspectives, different creative contributions that they make, working together to get to an outcome that is literally rich enough and sophisticated enough to be able to behave like a system instead of being like an object.
All right, so this is a starter into design thinking and human-centered design. Any key takeaways from that video? Feel free to put them in the chat. What'd you hear? Or come off mute. It's a Monday. It's 10. There's 22 brilliant minds in a room. What'd you hear? What'd you see they feel was interesting?
I just like the willingness to test and to get it right, to know that you're not necessarily going to be right out the gate. Like if you start with the end in mind, you may not have the right end in mind.
Fair. If you start with a solution, it's probably not the ideal solution. A lot of trial and error. Anyone else? Things you heard?
I would say developing the right question is often the hardest part.
Oh yeah. What is the question I'm trying to solve for? What is it we really need to know? Awesome takeaway, Benjamin. Ooh, chat's blowing up. Starting with a great question, figure out what the problem is. Observing to see how items are really used and where the problem exists. So I find this video particularly interesting, and I actually use it with college students to take this idea of design thinking started with like, how do I make a product? So they use this great umbrella of why do we need a computer mouse? What does this need? How do we develop it? But they do a really good job explaining like, but now we're solving for school systems. And so as a lot of you mentioned, like design thinking kind of starts in this product, tech, UX world, and it's this framework and a mindset to problem solving that centers who you're serving. And it's this idea that you're understanding, and this is kind of our big umbrella, understanding what a problem is. You're empathizing with folks, you're observing, you're defining then what the problems might be, coming up with those questions, ideating solutions, prototyping, trying again, testing, implementing, and we love linear processes. This is often kind of all over the place. You're coming in at different places, and we have to be willing to be flexible and agile with what folks need. Now, this is kind of one of these frameworks for just design thinking. Our fabulous folks at the Siebel Center have come up with this image, which we love at Helix, which kind of puts it in our linear brains a little bit, but it's this idea that through human-centered design, you're not just making a product, okay? You might be making an after-school program. You might be trying to solve for financial aid for your students, talking about first-generation students navigating a system, okay? You're preparing students for life skills. You are trying to figure out, we don't have enough counselors, what do we do? But no matter what, you've got to start with understanding your problem. And you're going to explore what folks need. What is it your students need, your educators, your larger stakeholders? You're going to try and empathize with them. And there are a lot of activities you can do for this, but trying to get in their heads, observing, talking to them, reflecting, okay? What is it that's going on? You then have to synthesize what you're seeing. Now, sometimes in understanding, you're going to take data that already exists and apply it to your own context. What are we seeing more broadly? What do we know about our specific location? And really try and interpret, what is that saying about y'all? What is our unique area that we have to address? Then, and what you're also seeing here, you're exploring and defining problems and opportunities. You're also doing this constant thing of creating choices and making choices. So you're always thinking like, what are all the things I can focus on? What do I want to focus on? Let's do this again. So you're constantly going, what do I see? What do I learn? Let's try some stuff, do it again, okay? So constantly broad honing it. And this is gonna keep going for you with whatever part of the process you're in. And when you start to say, okay, what is our actual thing we wanna focus on? You start to brainstorm, plan, narrow what you're looking at, and come up with ideas, okay? You then, as we saw in the video, you're gonna prototype. And in the human-centered space, we love to be hands-on, tactile, draw things out. You can build a project plan, but try something, okay? Engage folks, evaluate, recreate something, and then see how it works. Develop, execute it, sustain, evolve something. And then you're gonna do it again, all right? Questions on this? And are you seeing the connection between like design thinking, product, tech, to then look at these larger systems we have that we might dive into? Any questions so far? All right, so what we also love about design thinking is it is very open source. So there are a gajillion tools to use when we're looking, and let me go back to this one, Each of these little squares, and the Siebel Center was so smart to put this together like this, is different kind of tools you can use. And so I'm going to put this in the chat for you all, and we'll send this out in a follow-up as well. But these are all free tools that you can use. So when you're looking at this first one, the design kit, this pops up a bunch of methods. And so this is where, and there, you're going to see a bunch of different words, but this is like inspiration. This is where you're kind of diving in and you're seeing, okay, what am I understanding or synthesizing? These are different activities you can do. You can interview folks. You can have some conversation starters with your team. There's all these different activities you might use. Similarly, Stanford D School, and oh, it popped up in a different window for me. Let's see if this one, there we go. They have a whole bunch of tools here for you to use. So we're not going to get into these all today, but I wanted you to know that these are out here for you, okay? And so can folks see my screen again? Are we back? Okay. So these are different tools that kind of bite size into where am I on this journey? Am I empathizing? Am I interpreting? Am I planning? Am I ideating? Where am I? Okay. Now, what's interesting about human-centered design is you're constantly trying to think, who am I using this with? And you're always going to have multiple stakeholders, but you want to think, who am I really centering at the end of the day in this? Is it our school and program staff? Is it community stakeholders? Is it in programming class with students? And you're kind of thinking, where do I want to center in this? And so for Helix, I'm going to go over some examples of where we have centered different folks and how this has looked for our development. And so the first one I want to start with is our Ideas Incubator. And this is a program that we designed that is students engaging in design thinking. And this was students kind of using this process to build community amongst themselves and understand their community at large. And so they collaborated in teams to learn design thinking. And through the process, they explored their own communities and created a real world project. They then prototyped their solution with their community and real world stakeholders. And throughout this, things they were using was they were going through like a neighborhood scavenger hunt. They were observing, okay? They were going through a problem solving guide and kind of doing multiple iterations of who do I want to solve for? What are my concerns as a student? They mapped their neighborhood. They then were looking at, what are the assets in my neighborhood? We were doing this with a school in Chicago in Rogers Park on the far north side. One thing they discovered was that there was not a close hospital. And so they realized that for looking at what do we actually physically have. Other students also looked at bus benches, okay? And then some other students were looking more broadly at systems and they were looking at lunch solutions, okay? And so this is us kind of in programming running human-centered design. Another example of how Helix has used this is through curriculum design. And so this was educators centering students through human-centered design. We worked with a 21st century grantee team, which consisted of directors, site coordinators, classroom teachers, paras, and they wanted to create student and educator materials. And they knew that literacy was an academic target area for non-native English-speaking students. And what we wanted to know was, how do we engage students in literacy in an after-school program in a way that students were engaged with? And so through observations and student one-on-ones, and then something we called analogous design, which is looking at what do students like that isn't what we're trying to design for, okay? So we're designing for after school, what do they like? And we really focused on this group of students really into sports and soccer. And so we were thinking, how do we design a curriculum that's reusable, that can meet their needs and infuse literacy? And so we designed something called the Game of the Week, where students were learning a game each week, reading instructions of a game that they did not know, using good literacy practice and writing practices to then engage with this game. And this was really centering what were educators excited about doing, what were students really excited about doing, and how were these materials able to go through many different folks? Another thing we worked on was program design. And this is kind of our bigger umbrella. And this was looking at a lot of different stakeholders. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we partnered with a school district in rural Washington state. And it was that multiple district teams were coming together. As y'all know, we were like, what do we do? And so we were working with a 21st century team, in-school educators, and a drug prevention program. And we completed multiple collaborative brainstorming sessions, student and family interviews, and some rapid prototyping. And what we discovered was a lot of students didn't have internet. A lot of students were in intergenerational households. A lot of students were in families that there was a non-native English speaker as the main adult. And so we created these things called Create Crates that were an at-home subscription box picked up weekly from a school site. There were internet and non-internet options. And throughout time, we started with more internet options. We then went to a lot of phone options where you could use, we realized a lot of folks had phones, but they didn't have full tablets, they didn't have computers, but what could we do that was a short video on a phone or was a mobile friendly something? We started English first. We then went to dual language. Things were translated for us. And we then started building out intergenerational activities where an older student could lead something. And we tried to develop public products that could be showcased in windows or outside so students could walk around their neighborhood and note other students that were engaged in the same programming. And so these are kind of 3 examples of how we've used human-centered design, whether starting from just, hey, we're working with kids, what's the program? How are they using it? How can this build their skills? To how do we center educators and students in something that's being, just being brought out on the ground, to then what does a full program look like where we're continually rapid prototyping, changing things up, changing up site collections? All right, questions so far? We're also gonna have Q&A time, so we'll have more time at the end, but I always wanna make sure folks are with me. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Rachel now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. Thanks, Caitlin. So it was fun to see the video that you shared because I spent 12 years at IDEO before coming to become the inaugural director of Siebel Center for Design. So some of the, actually all the examples that were shown in that video was very excited. I was like, I know the school. Yeah. So, I live and breathe the design thinking process, and was excited to come back to my alma mater after being in industry for many years and that big chunk of time at IDEO out in Palo Alto and San Francisco to come and start the Siebel Center for Design at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. If you haven't been, come down and visit. I'll give you a VIP tour. We're very excited about having this, this wonderful space on campus that is dedicated to human-centered design and bringing that into education. So we can go to the next slides, please. So all of the practice that I've done in my career and coming to the University of Illinois to create the Siebel Center for Design, I really wanted our mission to be to practice, model, and teach design thinking using human-centered design to really reimagine not only our campus, but our community and our collective world, where we believe our big vision here is that everyone is an interdisciplinary, creative, and empathetic problem solver. And we didn't want to be very just to focus on higher education, though of course that's our primary focus, but I also wanted to be thinking about the whole pipeline and going even further up the pipeline and going into the education in the state of Illinois. I myself am a product of the state of Illinois education, public education, and was very excited to be thinking about how can I help have that impact through design thinking, based again on IDEO, not just looking at the traditional ways in which to use human-centered design thinking into product design, but thinking about these big impacts at scale in systems like education. If you can go to the next slide, please. So we think about this as not just a tool for college and for careers and technology, and the examples that were talked about in the chat here, but it really belongs in every classroom. And Caitlin just provided some awesome examples of how Helix is doing this. But we think that what is it we're doing at the university level, we think that K-12 students and educators, they really deserve access to these tools as well, that are empowering what we're doing at the higher education level in an industry. And again, taking those tools and adapting it for a K-12 classroom, a K-12 teacher, educators focusing on K-12. So again, this is all, like you can see the examples, the bullet points I have here are very much what it's echoing what Caitlin listed before, equipping with students with creative confidence and these real world problem solving skills, engaging teachers with the adaptable, human-centered methods that help kind of think about how you bring this into the classroom, opportunities to center equity, empathy, and access in learning, and elevating learning through these co-design, research-informed curriculum. So at IDEO, when I was at IDEO, we had a wonderful group of people who were very multidisciplinary, thinking about how we bring design thinking into all these wonderful systems to really have this impact through design, but not a lot of learning scientists. And coming into the University of Illinois, I tapped in very quickly to the learning scientists in our College of Education to help us develop that taxonomy that Caitlin showed before, and really having a lot more understanding about breaking down these components of learning objectives in the design thinking process and how that translates into a K-12 classroom. Going to that level of detail and having it be exceptionally research informed through the research practices that my colleagues have done at Siebel Center for Design on our work. We're very proud of how it is that we can, again, bring this to K-12 in Illinois. So go to the next slide, Caitlin, please. So what we've developed, and this is again in addition to those wonderful links that Caitlin shared earlier and posted in the chat, the free tools, we've been working with some teachers and some school systems in the state to develop our own human-centered design playbook. And this is not even hot off the presses. This is just like we are ready to get it published. And that's why it's in grayscale right now. But I wanted to let you know that this playbook is coming. It will be coming and being published by Siebel Center for Design for access to anyone, not only in our state, but anyone globally as well. So if you can go to the next slide, this is just showing just a couple slides we have in here of like how it is that we've created some of these tools very explicitly for the classroom and taking into the understanding and empathizing with a teacher and with students of how some of these components of our taxonomy and activities get applied into the classroom. So we can go to the next slide. This is just a couple examples: connections to the classroom, value in the classroom, learning outcomes, so that it's written in the language of an educator. The free tools that Caitlin listed in the chat again are really good, and IDEO Toolkit, that's my love language, and that's the stuff that I know about very well. But again, translating it to a teacher and having it be in that language was really important for me and my team to be thinking about how do we provide this very explicit, these explicit activities to these teachers and how they can apply it. So the next slide too, I have another one of our page in here. Yes, just common challenges, just understanding what are some of the tips and tricks and ways that they might be, that giving them a little bit more like heads up on how you utilize these tools that are available across the board. What are the suggestions of tools that we have? So this is, we have this playbook goes through all the elements of of our design thinking process that's in that taxonomy. So very excited about again having this. This is about it's not yet ready for prime time, but almost. We'll have this published soon for you all to enjoy. So the next slide. So in addition to this, the way we want to distribute this is that Siebel Center for Design has created a human-centered schools network, and that we want to create a collaborative community of K-12 educators, of school leaders, of administrators, teachers, that are helping, that really want to be bringing this into the classroom and reimagining what teaching and instruction looks like through this lens of human-centered design, and using the tools, the free tools that Caitlin provided, but also these, this playbook that we're creating, and that we really want to have this network support K-12 professionals in how do you take human-centered design tool sets, methodologies, mindsets into classrooms, schools, districts? How is it that we look at this as a system of scale that we can now start integrating and influencing and guiding? And then our goal is to share our tools, but also co-develop solutions, cultivate this culture of design in the state, think about this ways that, how do we connect these values, very people first values to K-12 professionals across these different contexts. Again, really focusing on the state of Illinois, but, we are thinking this could be something that, why stop at Illinois? This could be going throughout the state, going throughout the states, throughout the nation. Can these tools, I will get to that, Camila, in one moment. Next slide, please, Caitlin. So just to go a little bit more detail about the Human-Centered Schools Network on how to participate. Our first one would be just like individual educator that, if you're curious about human-centered design, we have a MOOC that we've created. We are in the process of creating a much more comprehensive Coursera course for K-12 educators that we will be publishing probably later in 2026. Of course, you can come down and visit Siebel Center for Design. You can be part of the network. And that we want to be hosting this annual Human-Centered Schools Network, this Human-Centered Schools Summit in the spring. We had our first launch this past spring. We'll be doing another one this spring. And again, having everybody wanting to be, be part of this. And then sort of being connected into the community. The next tier would be the curious schools. So that we have the individual educator, but then do we go into like, hey, schools are perhaps, are wanting to be introduced into human-centered design, that it's not just at the teacher level, but maybe it's multiple teachers, or maybe it's a principal, where we would love to be able to then come and bring some in-person workshops to you to help kind of understand how you can get this, get this integrated into your school. Thinking about how is it that this, this membership goes to all the participating teachers within this school. Present what you've done at our annual summit, get access to these MOOC resources and Coursera, et cetera. And then our third tier would be like, hey, you know what? I'm a school and I'm all in. And these are the schools that we have been working with currently to be creating our playbook, where it has been, a longer journey and a commitment in, year one, building your foundation, and then year two, expanding your impact. This is a lot based on the work that I did at IDEO, where we were working with companies, corporations who were like, we need to transform our culture. And how do we bring human-centered design and design thinking, not only to what it is that we are producing into our customers, in this case, our students, but really, how is it that we need to change how we act internally within a school, and have this be a part of our practices and principles as a school, with how it is that we bring human-centered design, not just about human-centered design, but with human-centered design and through human-centered design. So if you go to the next slide, we have this is a QR code. Let me just get the links here for it as well. This is the QR code to learn more about our human school. You got it in there. Oh, thank you, Caitlin. And then Camila had that question about bringing this to secondary education. This is secondary education, and then beyond secondary education, we have our SHIFT program that is it's Scholars in Human-Centered, Innovative, and Forward-Thinking Teaching. So this would probably be a more advanced level of teaching about human-centered design and how to bring this into your practice beyond the K-12, and much more explicitly into a classroom and curriculum design, and more focused on the higher education aspects. But I think that this is something that we were seeing is more applicable beyond just the higher education learning. So I will pause. Those are my slides. I'm very excited to get the opportunity to present to this group, and hope that some of you are inspired to come in and join us on this journey as well. Oh, Benjamin has his hand up. Yes, Benjamin.
Thanks, Rachel, and wonderful presentation. I'm Ben Boer. I'm actually the Senior Director of Data at Education Systems Center, one of the hosts for this. But I just wanted to ask, to what degree, or if you're partnering with the College of Education at U of I at all in regards to this, and also maybe with other, other U of I system schools. We're at NIU, this seems like it's interesting to colleges of education in addition to the schools themselves.
Right, right. So we are working with, we have close collaborators in the College of Education. A lot of like learning how to learn, a lot about the technology in the classroom. We could go into and looking at how generative AI applies into education now. So we have very close connections with the College of Ed here at U of I. We connected with the Illinois Innovation Network around our shift program, which I put in the link here, which is and they were excited about taking what we've developed on our campus for folks on our campus to learn about how to bring this practice into their classroom at the higher ed level. I was been very adamant that this should not just stay at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, that this needs to go out to the rest of the state. We are being paid for by state funds, and there's no reason that it should just be for U of I. And of course, NIU has a spot in my heart because I grew up in DeKalb and Sycamore area, and my father was a professor at NIU. So yes, we should get this into NIU. But this
Okay,
also comes from
well,
a lot of like folks from U of I system, and then the rest of the the Illinois State system of colleges and community colleges, of people asking us, can they come and take our workshops? And so I was thinking, I need to find a way to get this more out into the state and to scale it. And so that's why we developed this shift program. There's a cohort that is opening up in the for our spring 2026. IIN said they would support in paying the tuition for a couple folks at each hub, and I think NIU is a hub at IIN. But we're excited just going to bring this out. We also are bringing this out globally. We just had our shift content translated into Spanish. One of our visiting professors from the College of Ed went back to her home in Colombia and has been running a cohort of our shift program in Colombia and in the country of Colombia. And so we're very excited about not just hoarding this for our university and our campus, but getting this very accessible and out there in the world. So yes, let's talk. How do we create a Siebel Center for Design in all the campuses, right? Without having you don't have to have the $47 million to build a building. It's not just the building. It's the ideology, it's the methodology, it's the programming that we've designed that can be expanded into the other elements of the state.
Yeah, please let us know how we can be helpful. Just a quick follow-up. My title has data in it. I actually come out of the tech world. I worked with a company called eLabs many years ago.
Oh, yeah.
That did this type of work. But traditionally, human-centered design has been quite a qualitative process. And so, any thoughts on how you bring the quantitative part into it as well?
Right. And that's why yeah, absolutely. In my first week at the university, after being in a very qualitative world for many years, I got the immediate question of, how do you know this works? And that's when I went across the street and went to the College of Ed, and I said, I need some learning scientists to give me some metrics at the quantitative level. So in the taxonomy that Caitlin walked through, and the mini triangles within the big triangles, we are working with the learning scientists to define each of those areas where we can now drill down and collect data during like pre and post surveys, during other types of quantitative methods and mixed methods that I, again, tapping into the wonderful resources and experts I have here on campus. We've been publishing, we have a lot of data to be able to prove the efficacy that was necessary in order to credentialize not only the direction I was moving in, but now that I'm 8 years in the job, being able to really point to some specifics around how are we having this impact, and now how are we having it at scale. So you're asking the exact questions that were pushed upon me in my first week 8 years ago. So yes, sorry, activity. Sorry, let's go.
You're all good. We've
Yeah.
got Q&A time, so we're just going to shorten that at the end. We're moving around. We are rolling with the flow as designers. So we are going to have some time in breakouts to do a quick design activity. This is something to start to get in the mind of your user in quotes. And so in just a moment, we're going to go into breakouts and do an activity that's called What Do You See? And so this is almost as if you were going to be observing someone in their natural environment, but we're just going to be looking at photos. And so I'm putting in the chat a document you should all be able to see. But once you get into your breakouts, you can open this document, and we will not have up to 10 rooms, but I think Emily, how many breakout rooms will we have?
Probably 4.
4. All right. So breakouts rooms 1 through 4, you'll be able to see in this document to click to your breakout room, and you're going to see a photo. And in your groups, I want you to feel like you are designers and get creative. Okay. Like, this is your time. Like, if any of you were improv folks, dig down your creativity, go and harness your, there are kind of your creativity, no rules, dig deep, and think about, where do you think this person is? Why? What are the clues? What challenges is this person facing? What are this person's needs versus wants? What might this person need to have a better experience wherever they are? And how might you make this person's experience better? And if you could add anything to this picture, what would you add? And if you could ask this person 2 questions, what would you ask them? And the goal on this is to not just answer questions like, well, they're here, obviously. Dig deeper. Think why. Like, what is it that leads you to believe that? How do you know that? Okay. So we'll spend, Emily, are we cool with 5 minutes? And then we'll come back. Welcome back, folks. There's never enough time. There's always, this is a fun activity that could go on forever, but, does anyone want to come off mute? Anything you decided, discovered, thought of?
I was impressed how much we were able to cover in such a short amount of time. I thought the images were really great, and we were a breakout room 2, and it was good fodder for conversation.
I'm glad there was conversation. That's and it is something that just starts to get you going. And I think this is something in design, there are infinite community needs. And for us, when we're thinking of human-centered design and centering students, we're navigating a lot of ambiguity. We don't know everything in our students' stories. We don't know everything in all of our educators' stories, but how are we problem solving most effectively and trying to dig to the root? And it pushes us to think from multiple perspectives. And our goal for today, and Helix, we try and help you do that. And so how, in whatever you are doing, do you center students and think from more perspectives and start to create and make choices most effectively? And also, how do you sit in the discomfort of not knowing is a skill? So this, I gave you stock images. I pulled them off Pexels. So, these are stage photos, could be AI. I don't know. I got them. So, how do we sit when we don't know, and how do we try and dig deeper?
Again, thank you so much to Caitlin, Rachel, and Sean. Really appreciate all the examples that you gave and all the tools that you've provided. This really provided lots of food for thought and ways that we can use human-centered design in our different spaces. And thank you to all of you who were able to join us, and hope to see you at one of our other meetings.